Chapter 1. The Weeping Square. Hyrule's sky was ablaze with shades of orange and red when Tylon and the other legionnaires arrived in the northern part of the Weeping Square. Dusk tinted the stone and wooden buildings with a golden glow, but the air carried something that contrasted with the beauty of the scenery. A diffuse smell of smoke and sweat mingled with the sound of the crowd gathering ahead. Beside him, Hender was still walking with his helmet under his arm, his face tense. His friend was never prepared for battle, and Tylon knew he didn't want to be there. He thought of speaking an encouraging word to his friend, perhaps reminding him of the noble cause of protecting the kingdom. But Hender spoke first. "This doesn't smell right," he muttered as he marched towards the heart of the protest, without looking at his companion. Tylon tightened his grip on his spear and continued in silence. He looked down and saw the royal coat of arms of Hyrule emblazoned on the shield he carried. This image cheered him up a little. He felt purposeful again. The thought of his position as the king's vigilante filled him with pride, but the weight of the steel and leather of his armor seemed more suffocating than usual, as if the atmosphere of the square was seized by something invisible, about to explode. Tylon looked up again, towards the center of the square. You could hardly see anything but people. The crowd was a restless sea of sweaty faces and fiery voices. Men and women of different ages, wearing worn tunics, frayed cloaks, and patched vests, held up makeshift placards or simply clenched their fists against the sky. "Justice for the left-out people! The king stole our water!" This was the biggest protest Tylon had ever seen. Not that he had seen many in his 7 years of service in the Capital Legion, although the frequency seemed to have accelerated in recent months. However, what most caught Tylon's attention were the demands. It was common to hear words like justice or rights coming from the Hylian population of the capital. But accusing the king of stealing the water? That was new. Tylon stayed focused. He advanced at a slow pace alongside Hender, now fully equipped, entering the square with caution and a heavy countenance. The Capital Legion, with the precision of military organization, was moving further and further into the space, shrinking the size of the square. The protest began to realize that the legionnaires intended to trap everyone against the square's buildings. The voices began to grow louder, and Tylon continued to advance in line with his colleagues. He knew the orders. The protest had to be dispersed before it became a real riot. At one point, Tylon spotted a man standing in the middle of the crowd. He wasn't shouting, he wasn't holding up placards, he was just watching. But he still attracted attention, because his hair was silver and his eyes, sharp as blades, had a reddish-purple tint. The man watched the legionnaires as if he could see through the metal of their armor. Tylon didn't know who he was, but something about him made him uneasy. Before he could think about it, a command echoed in the air. "Reform the line!" Captain Valen's gruff voice immediately broke the tension. The Legion captain, mounted on a dark brown horse, raised his sword and ordered them forward. The soldiers began to walk in sync, slamming their spears against their shields at a menacing pace. The sound echoed through the square like muffled thunder. The demonstrators hesitated, taking a few steps back, but held their ground. Tylon noticed that Hender also hesitated. "This is not looking good," he whispered. And it really wasn't. Not long afterwards, with the protesters crammed on top of each other, pushing, shouting, raising their arms, and the legionnaires pressing them with their long shields illustrated with the royal coat of arms, the worst happened. The first blood. The blow didn't come from the demonstrators. A soldier, at the head of the formation, plunged his spear into the belly of an unarmed man. A scream of pain ripped through the air. Tylon didn't get to see the whole thing, but he saw enough. All the tension in the square was concentrated at that point, and for a moment, time seemed to have frozen. Then chaos descended on the square. The cries of indignation became howls of rage. People began to attack, first one, then two, then four, until half the protesters were charging at the Legion's line of defense. They attacked however they could, punching, kicking, grabbing the legionnaires. Some used sticks and stones. Tylon found himself thrust into the middle of the melee, his spear spinning in the air to keep the civilians at bay. Hender, who hadn't left Tylon's side since they left the guardhouse, had disappeared. Tylon felt an impact coming hard against his left arm. A woman had hit him with a piece of wood. He staggered, regained his balance, and used his shield to push her away without striking her directly. His instincts called for restraint, not killing. But other legionnaires didn't have the same restraint. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw Captain Valen get off his horse and strike down a Proester with a brutal blow from his sword. Blood splattered on the stone. Tylon swallowed. And then everything got even worse. Something exploded near him. A blinding flash, a deafening hum. Deku nuts. The protesters had brought Deku nuts. The explosion of light blinded his eyes. A ringing sound took over his ears. Tylon hadn't expected to lose his senses like that. His military training was slipping away, and he was losing track of the situation. Things were happening fast. Information was confused and all mixed up. It was difficult to concentrate. Tylon realized he was stumbling, felt himself tripping over something, and almost fell to the ground in all his metal armor. As he tried to regain his balance, a sharp pain shot through his body. He didn't know where the blow had come from. He only felt a stabbing pain coming from his torso. He looked down and saw a wooden stake lodged between his ribs. The world was spinning. Sounds were muffled. His body, so trained, so resistant, became as fragile as a rag doll. His breathing became short, dragged. Every step seemed to take him away from the battle, but he didn't know where. Voices mixed together, shouts, orders, the clang of metal, the warmth of blood dripping down his waist. Tylon tripped over something again and fell to his knees. More noise, more smell of smoke, confusion. Tylon was completely lost to the pain and the effect of the Deku nut. Some time passed and Tylon began to regain his senses. He realized he was in an alleyway, far from the center of the confusion. He stumbled around, trying to organize his thoughts. He leaned his back against a wall, took a deep breath and looked up. The lights of dusk had given way to a dingy gray curtain that covered the sky between the rooftops. Tylon took another breath. He looked again at the wooden stake, now in the center of a pool of blood that soaked his clothes beneath his armor. He realized that his priority was to take that stake out of him. It wouldn't be an easy task, but he wouldn't be able to do anything else unless he treated the wound. He looked around to see if he had any options. The alley was narrow, crammed between two cold stone buildings, with a few crates and barrels scattered along the way. His eyes, still clouded by the effect of the Deku nut, caught sight of a silhouette lying ahead. Unlike the crates scattered around the alley, that shape looked like a body. He realized it was a man. He was half sitting, half lying down next to a crate. Tylon, perhaps more out of instinct, approached the man. It was an adult Hylian, middle-aged, who looked back at Tylon when he arrived at his side. The man was wounded, his eyes deep and dim.
"Water,"
the man mumbled with a hoarse voice. Tylon blinked, trying to stay focused. What did you say?"
"Water. There's water no more."
There was no strength in his voice. Tylon frowned. He didn't understand right away. "What do you mean? You're hurt. You need medical help, not water." Tylon noticed that the man's lips were cracked and his teeth were stained with blood.
"The king closed the reservoirs. There's nothing left. For us. For days now."
Tylon's head throbbed. He couldn't process it. The man was clearly dying from his injuries, and yet he was babbling about water. Before he could ask any more questions, the man collapsed. Tylon lost what little courage he had regained. He felt his own body falter and thought it best to sit down. He let himself fall to the ground, feeling pain as the impact reverberated through his torso. He took another breath and looked down. The stake in his torso seemed to be pulling him into darkness. He was starting to get desperate. He looked around. There was no one there apart from the fainted, wounded man. The alley was a long way from the chaos of the demonstration, but there were still shouts and noises coming from far away. There was nothing else to do. He decided to try to remove it himself. He held on tight with one of his hands, which made him realize only now that he had lost his spear. He tried to pull a little, but an immediate spasm of pain made him lose his strength. "Don't touch that!" the firm voice of a woman echoed. Tylon was startled. He looked to the side and saw a woman emerge from the corner of the alley. Tylon couldn't see her properly, but she seemed to be a civilian, perhaps even a protester. She came closer and crouched down next to Tylon, who was able to look at her more calmly. Her face was young and very dirty with soot. He didn't know the woman, but he still felt a small sense of relief. "You won't be able to get it off by yourself. I think I can help you. I know a place that can take care of you." Her voice was firm, but with tones of concern. Behind her, another figure appeared. "Leave that worm there," said the man. Tylon couldn't tell at first who it was. His vision was blurred and seemed to be getting darker. He tried to focus on the man standing behind the woman and realized that he had silver hair. "Or rather, finish the job," the man said with anger and resolution. It was the man he had noticed in Saqure earlier. The man stared coldly at Tylon. Intense anger and hatred exuded from that countenance, half hidden by silver hair. The woman hesitated. "He's hurt." There was doubt and concern in her voice. "And how many of our people aren't?" The silver hair man's voice rose. "Let's get the fainted one," he said, now looking at the man collapsed by thirst. Tylon couldn't react. Blood ran hot down the side of his body. "Still, it's not fair. We should treat him too. He's a Hylian as much as we are," argued the woman. "A Hylian who oppresses his brothers is no longer Hylian to me. Let's go. We need to find Keltier urgently." Before he had even finished his sentence, the man had already turned and left. The woman avoided him for a moment, but got up and followed her leader. Tylon was alone, again. He felt an immense tiredness come over him. He was weak, with no strength to move. He had no spirit. A gloomy sadness started to sour the pain in his body. He felt an overwhelming urge to lie down and close his eyes. This was consequence of his injury and the loss of blood. He shouldn't give up. That would mean death, for certain. But he still couldn't react. He closed his eyes and took another deep breath. His arms fell beside his body, against the dirt and the stone floor. He thought about Hender, and whether his friend was injured too. He wondered if Hender would miss him if he died. Would it be an honorable death, worthy of a legionnaire from the capital of Hyrule? He hoped so. He felt like his head was tilting to one side, but thought it best to stay that way. Finally, he would rest. His body was numb and the pain was sharp but small, concentrated on the side of his body. He tried to pray. A weak prayer without words, just an intimate wish, a thought, just a feeling, an empty plea. Perhaps Hylia understood him. At some point, Tylon can't say if it was minutes or hours later, he felt people near him. He didn't open his eyes, but his body signaled that these people were manipulating him. His head felt lighter, and he felt a wind against his face. His body also began to feel lighter. He felt touches on his shoulders and chest. Something was happening. He opened his eyes a little. He saw that he was without his armor. There were movements of arms and hands flying above him. He felt something being wrapped around his torso. He looked down weakly. It was a cloth wrapping around his chest and belly and containing his bleeding. Eventually he felt shoulders under his armpits. He was being carried. This gave him a small injection of hope. Someone had found him. Was it Hender? Maybe Captain Valen? As he was being carried, he tried to steady his head. He looked around. There were two people, and they were too close to see their faces, but he noticed the hair of one of them, silver. And then suddenly all the hope vanished, and a cold fear took its place. The little energy that had returned to Tylon dissipated and he felt his head drop again, and then the world turned black.